Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and the last few weeks we've talked a lot about what's going on over at retailers like REI and Dick's, as well as EMS and the specialty market. So today, we're bringing out a big gun who can speak to what is happening in outdoor retail. Today, we're chatting with Eoin Comerford. But before that, we got a few housekeeping items for you, my Rock Fighters. Be sure to follow and rate The Rock Fight wherever you are listening. We want to hear from you. And if you want to reach out to us, you can email us. Send your emails to myrockfight@gmail.com, or you can head over to Instagram, and there you can revel in our Rock Fight action figure series. Bet you didn't know about that. Find us over on Instagram at rockfight.co. All right, let's start the show.
Welcome to the Rock Fight, Rock Fight, Rock Fight.
Over the past few weeks here on the Rock Fight, we've talked a lot about the state of outdoor retail and especially how the playing field between REI and Dick's seems to be leveling out. And those conversations got the attention of Eoin Comerford. Eoin is an outdoor industry veteran. He was the CEO of Moose Jaw Mountaineering for 12 years and was a crucial cog in Moose Jaw's sale to Walmart and eventual integration into Dick's Sporting Goods. So he has a unique view on the outdoor specialty retailer as well as the big box retailer. And he's here on the show today to offer his thoughts on what's happening at REI, the comparison of REI to Dick's, as well as the recent bankruptcy acquisition of Eastern Mountain Sports by Mountain Warehouse. Welcome back to the Rock Fight, and today we're taking another deep dive into what's happening across outdoor retail with Eoin Comerford. All right, well, we're joined today by Eoin Comerford, former CEO of Moose Jaw, and who is currently advising and growing young outdoor brands and retailers. Welcome to the show, Eoin. Good to see you, bud.
Thanks for having me on.
I think I said to you the other day, like your entire life, did you ever consider just changing your name to the American spelling of Eoin since you live here?
No, never thought about it. I mean, obviously, I get a lot of people that call me Ian or something else, and usually when I explain if the E is silent, it makes sense. People get it. But I'll meet people. We'll be talking back and forth at Owen, and then they'll see it spelled, and then they'll call me Ian. So it's annoying, but it's a conversation starter.
It is a conversation, and that's a really good point. If the E is silent, it's just phonetically correct, right? I mean, it's
Right.
I honestly thought we were going to talk to a member of the Lord of the Rings cast, which was pretty exciting.
There's a little Tolkien going on
right.
with
I was
your
pretty
name.
excited
Let's
about
be
that.
honest, you know.
Right.
Well, so in my high school class, there were 6 Owens, 4 EOINs, 1 OWEN, and then one the ancient Gaelic spelling EOGHAN. So try that on for size.
Wow, that's rough for that kid. My buddy Luke, who I knew lived in Seattle, he had a son. He's from Ireland, and they named him Finn. They spelled it like Fionn, like Fionn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I appreciate your heritage, buddy, but if you're really going to raise him here, you just created a lifetime a nightmare for this kid. Like for the rest of his life, he's going to be, just call me Finn. It's fine. Just call me Finn. So... Well, a few weeks back here on the Rock Fight during a conversation about outdoor participation, I was positing that a decline in core participants would be felt at specialty doors, and our friend Wes Allen, who owns a specialty door, cited some statistics that show REI is more at risk at this point. That episode followed 2 more on the show where we dug into some of their struggles there at REI, especially as it pertains to the outdoor retail competitive landscape when compared to someone like a Dick's Sporting Goods. You know, and all of this moved you to put up a post on LinkedIn earlier this week comparing the OPEX of REI and Dick's to see what was happening from these two from a dollar and cents perspective. So I do want to ask you who you had to kill to get that information. I mean, that was pretty in-depth over there. Like, nice job.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all publicly available. Both publicly report their numbers. So yeah, you have to do a little digging to find the old REI numbers, but they're out there.
They are there.
Yeah, they weren't always. Oh yeah, but they weren't all apples to apples. So I had to use a little bit of sort of tribal knowledge to figure out occupancy costs versus this or that. But yeah, it was an interesting comparison, I think.
Well, so when you did the work there and you dug into it, what did you discover? What kind of comparing the two head to head? Are they at an interesting place? Are there some correlations to be made?
Totally. I think there were 3 big numbers that jumped out at me. The first one is actually the productivity in REI stores. Even last year, you could say an off year, over $600 a square foot. And within the retail space, typically $300 is kind of considered average or the standard. Like if you're doing $300 in specialty retail, that's not bad. So $600 is just really strong. And I think it talks to just the stickiness of the co-op model and that membership model. Yes, maybe an older customer, but loyal, and they keep coming back and they keep spending. So, if you just if you told me that number, by itself, I'd say, oh, these guys are just killing it, right?
Yeah.
You look at the Dick's number, by comparison is under $300. So that was the one thing, and just really a really impressive number. But then you say, okay, well, so then how are they not killing it with those numbers? And really, the two numbers after that jumped out were their merchandise COGS. So in other words, the amount that they spend on the cost of the merchandise that they sell, and then also their payroll. Both were really tough relative to history, but also relative to the competition. And like on the merch COG side, they had been or their margins, let's say. So their margins back in 2021, which was a banner year for the whole industry, obviously, but their margins were 47%, which is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
Dick's at the time was 44.2%. So, and that 47, is a big number. Historically, though, REI was in the sort of the 45% range. Okay. So really amazing number. Look at last year, it's 38.7%. That is a
Mm-hmm.
massive drop. I mean, just incredible. And so you look at it and you go, well, what the hell happened here? Because, I think everyone in the industry had a bit of a tough time last year with margins, but nothing like this. This is out of the ordinary. And really, it comes down to their private brand. It was really, really what killed them. Because if you look at the end of 21 banner year, right? They made the same mistake that almost everyone else in the industry did, was thinking that, oh, 22 will be just like 21. We're going to order, not only are we going to order as much as we sold in 21, but we were actually constrained, so we're going to order even more. So they have all this pipeline of product coming in and private brand. Plus, oh, by the way, they're leaning into private brand because it's higher margin. They think maybe it drives loyalty, whatever. So more and more of the stuff that they're selling is private brand. So they do all that, and then they're hit with this. I think it was in late 21. They had this huge um, IT implementation disaster, right? And what happened was they couldn't get product through their warehouses to their stores, and so everything backed up. And then by the time it all sort of unwound in 22, it flowed into the stores and created this huge bottleneck and kind of a huge issue with their private brand, and that flowed into 23. So let's say the private brand had been doing like a 60 margin
Mm-hmm.
in the past. They were blowing stuff out at 40, 50, 60 off and
That
quality
kills
gear,
profitability,
right?
right? Because I mean, like
Oh my god.
for forever, those products have had way higher margin than anything they're buying from their vendors.
Right. It just and solid stuff, right? But they were
Yeah.
just because the thing is, right, as a retailer, one of the nice things typically is that you can manage your inventories to a degree by canceling on order, right? The brands hate it, obviously, but we'll place our as a retailer, let's say for the stuff that we're getting next spring, those orders were placed 2 months ago. So
Mm-hmm.
they're being placed like 9 months in advance. Now, if things start to get a bit shaky coming out of the year, you might start canceling off some of those orders to kind of right size your inventory. Now, you can do that with another brand. You can't do that with your private brand, right? You've already committed to that stuff. You've
Right.
bought the fabrics, you've bought the stuff, it's being manufactured. It can't go anywhere else other than in your store. So really what happened with REI last year and it was this sort of what I would call it the private brand pinch. They just had way too much. And within retail, we talk about something called open to buy,
Yep.
which basically means, hey, as a merchant, let's say you're the tent guy at REI, right? You have X amount of open to buy or X amount of inventory that you can have on hand to drive your sales, right? Now, in a normalized world, that's fine. You've got so much that's for private brand, you got so much left over to buy all the other brands. Well, what happens when you get all backed up with this private brand is you don't have a whole lot of room for your private brands for the other brands, and so they had to go through and just absolutely slash the other brand product, right? So the stuff that they were buying from the Marmots, the Mountain Hardwares of the world, right? Um, and then that all rolled downhill because then those brands, that stuff was already on the water for them, so they're like, oh. shit, what do we do now? So they've got to either try to push it to other retailers who already have enough stuff, thank you, or they have to push it to their own D2C and start discounting themselves, and then it creates this vicious cycle because now REI can't sell the stuff they do have at full. It's on and on we go. So it was a big driver in the whole margin issue for the year.
When it compounds everything, I would imagine, right? Because now profitability
Exactly.
is impacted. So when you're now you're dealing with labor union problems and all of these other things, and it's just one thing after another. It kind of to kind of drill down. Are these? I kind of want to know, are these problems of the moment or problems of the long term when you kind of compare when you look at these numbers and kind of hear that story, right? So based on based on the post you put on LinkedIn, there were about 50 comments or so. You got a lot of engagement with it, but there was a lot of goodwill baked into REI, kind of from a lot of people on there. And we say the same thing with folks like Patagonia. It's something objectively like, oh, this should be improved will come out, and you'll still hear the cheerleaders who will come out. Oh no, these people can do no wrong. Which, I mean, that's like a good and a bad thing. I feel like about the outdoor space. There's a lot of that. That said, if you go to REI's Reddit board right now, you'll find a lot of vocal REI employees who are weighing in on how things are going. And, some of them are very typical. And there's one that I would suggest reading called "Is REI Going to Make It?" If you're interested in where maybe some people are standing on this, which, look, it's the internet, take it all with a grain of salt. However, putting all that together, so putting on your sort of corporate leadership hat for a second, like, where do you start with REI today? If someone said, hey, Owen, here are the keys to REI, like where do you start?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to fix the private brand program. You have to fix the planning, the management of that. I would say they went a little too far because as an enthusiast customer going in there, yes, I'm sure there are people that love the REI brand, but there's also a lot of people that love other brands too. And if your private brand is pushing out that other stuff, that's a challenge, right? And also, it does create this inflexibility for your inability to basically react to trends, react to volume, react to sales. So I think that needs to be done. Now, I would tell you though, it's already. I mean, everything that I'm saying here, by the way, is not news to REI or their management. They're not. They're
I don't
not.
think they're listening
Sitting
to
on.
this podcast.
No, I don't. Well, they probably aren't. But they're not sitting on their hands.
They
Since
better.
the big issues back, a couple of years ago, they've basically turned over almost the whole executive suite. They've brought in a new position, chief supply chain officer, to deal with that side of things, a new VP of inventory planning to deal with all of that side to make sure they're ordering all the right stuff. So, and a new CTO, right, to deal with the technology pieces. So they're working on this, right? And that would be the first place I would look. The second place is that jumps off the page is payroll, right? You look at it, payroll, in REI, 25% of revenue. That's, whew, it's about 14% at
Yeah.
Dick's. Doing them, and it's even crazier if you look at it in terms of like retail dollars per square foot, right? Because obviously, REI has fewer stores, smaller stores, so retail dollars per square foot, it's or payroll dollars, sorry, per square foot, $166 at REI, $34 at Dick's.
Wow.
$34. So it's about a 5x difference. But if you account for higher hourly wages, which they definitely have at REI, basically the way I look at it is, if you're in a section or if you're standing in 1 square foot of at an REI, you're 4 times more likely to be able to see an associate there, a green vest, than you are to see somebody at a Dick's.
Right. Well, that kind of definitely speaks to the model of both stores, even historically, right? I mean, I remember when I was tech repping back in the day, and I would do Dick's clinics. I don't know if they still do clinics at Dick's. I can't imagine that they do. It was still difficult to get a group together who are even engaged and even cared what you had to say versus in REI. And I've kind of been on record as I've never been a huge REI fan as a consumer, but I still value what they bring to the industry. Even as a consumer, I still like their stores. And you're still more likely to run into somebody who at least it says, "Hey, how are you?" which you may not get at all at a Dick's, even if they don't know, the details of a certain product. It does feel to me that that REI is really kind of in a rock and hard place kind of situation, no matter what the topic is we're talking about, right? If it's you cut back on the house line of products, and that helps you with inventory, but it probably helps, it hurts you on margin. If it's you cut back on employees, well, the green vest is what's known about your stores. It's kind of is it just, and they're still wanting to expand. They announced they wanted to open to 10 stores this year. Does it feel like maybe the smart thing to do right now is a little bit of a retreat, like cut back on some of those plans, kind of get your house in order to have us maybe even close a few doors, that don't want to put anybody out of a job, but that's just what feels to me like probably the right course of action here.
I don't think it's about retrenching because, again, if you're getting $600 a square foot, that's huge productivity. And
Yeah.
so those stores should be kicking out really solid four-wall contribution, what we call it in the industry. So they're
Yeah.
kicking out profit to support the big corporate entity. I don't think it's about closing. You should always be looking at your store fleet and potentially, cutting the ones that aren't working, or really, investing a lot of time with landlords to say, hey, listen, this isn't working. We're going to move down the street if you're not willing to help us update the store or do this or do that. And I think it's really more about it. The rock and a hard place thing is I think a really good way to look at it, because one of the reactions to the LinkedIn post was, well, this isn't a fair comparison. It's apples and oranges, which it is, but REI isn't outdoor specialty. I mean, does do people believe that it's the same as going to your local gear store? I don't think so. It's not the same experience. It's not the same level of interaction necessarily with the folks on the floor. It's not the same brand mix.
Right.
It's not, right. So it's not specialty outdoor, but it's not big box really. It is. It's sort of
They are
between the
kind
two.
of a weird in between. They really are.
They are, and then they're a co-op on top of that.
Right.
I mean, the co-op model, I think, actually, it's a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing because of you have all these members, 23, 25 million, whatever it is, right? Very loyal, look forward to their dividend, etc. But then on the flip side, it's almost embarrassing if you have a profit, right, as a co-op, because
Yeah.
you can't, like, you're a business but you're not a business, right. And so the tendency is, in the good years you kind of try to hide the profit, and then in the bad years you're like, oh shit, what do we do now? As opposed to if you're just a for-profit retailer, you're going to, like a Dick's, for example. Dick's, they are just laser focused on costs, so that in the good times they've got great profits, but in the bad times aren't as bad, right? And so, whereas I think because of REI's co-op history, the tendency has been they haven't been as tight on the costs when they could have been, and now they're. I think what we're seeing is some of those issues in the tough times.
I mean, it's the co-op has that it's our store vibe, right? You're not going to hear about probably not going to hear about unionization of efforts at Dick's. I'd be surprised, right? I mean, it's kind of like I'm not judging either way on that, but it just sort of, you see how the history at REI and the affinity for the store and we give back to you and, opt outside and all of these things kind of then lead to like this sort of like, well, this is different because, I remember thinking like, God, if I would just go get another job if I was in the position of some of these folks. Well, some of them are really passionate. Like, no, this is what REI stands for, and we got to defend what REI stands for.
Which I'd like to ask a question. That great, revenue per square foot number. How much is that as a result or correlated to that high payroll per square foot? I mean, are those hand in hand?
I think there's definitely a relationship between the service model at REI and the revenue per square foot. You can't deny that, right? I mean, the people are coming in and they want that level of service. Is it 100%? If you cut back a little bit on the staffing, sure, would it really impact the dollars per square foot that much? I don't know. REI themselves did a bit of a restructuring late last year. They actually cut out a whole level, this lead title within the store. And that did cut some people. So they're definitely looking at their store model, but it doesn't shock me that REI is going through this union thing right now, because typically the reason why unions don't typically work in retail or even in Amazon in most cases is because of the turnover, right? To have the ownership to see something through like a union campaign, it's like a 2, 3 X year campaign to make that happen. You have to have people that want to, that have real ownership for the company and for their position, and really want, to better it. And so you have to have this longevity. And so with retail, that isn't typical with the sort of turnover you see. But that's not the case at REI. Obviously, you've got folks there that have been there for a long time, that that really do feel ownership for the company, and so therefore want that for union representation.
Another thing we've been talking about and came out of the participation conversation is where people are shopping. And I said in one of those podcasts that anecdotally, I kind of do see a little bit of a leveling the playing field, just in terms of like even where I'll shop, right? There's a Dick's that's closer to my house versus an REI. I also have a GOA specialty door that's really close to my house. So if I want an outdoor experience, I go to my GOA shop. Shout out to Nomad Outfitters, no free ads, but there's where we are. And then, but then if I just need the staple, the Dick's kind of has a lot of the same stuff from a staple perspective that I might find at an REI, which is 25, 30 minutes away. When you look at the numbers, I mean, or even just anecdotally, where do you think people are shopping? Do you feel like that playing field is leveling in terms of like how people view these stores and where they shop?
Well, I would say neither of us on this are typical shoppers, right? I mean, well, I've never actually bought
That's
anything at an
true.
REI. I've competitively shopped in REI, um, but also I think you're you're an outdoor expert, so you're not necessarily going into
Thank you.
a Dick's or an REI well, needing needing any level of assistance, right?
Right,
I
right.
think the bigger question is around new customers, right? And the younger customers and people that are new to the outdoors. One of the things that I know you've touched on this podcast is the OIA participation report, right?
Hmm.
Which basically said, hey, yeah, we had all these new participants that joined us in COVID. Most of them are still participating, maybe not as often, and then the core enthusiast is definitely not participating as often, right? And so the winner, I think, is going to be the folks that gain the loyalty of that new participant, right? And to me, the question is like, who's that going to be? Is it going to be the REIs of the world? Is it going to be the GOA retailers of the world, or is it going to be the Dicks of the world? And that's I think what's going to really tell the tale over the next 5, 10 years.
That's exactly kind of what I'm getting at when I think I make the comparison of the stores. It's, when I went in and sort of surveyed what was in my local Dick's and trying to put my shoes of like a new or a younger outdoor consumer, there's really nothing that they can't get at Dick's, right? In terms of like to go have sort of a basic outdoor hiking or
An
camping
outside
adventure.
adventure.
An outside adventure.
Right.
Yeah, I think what the key word there is basic, right? I
Right,
mean, I
right.
think Dick's, I think Dick's definitely is covering the bases, but not to the level that an REI would, right?
Yeah.
Both in terms of brands and in terms of depths of options. So I think that's a big part of it, and
Yeah.
obviously then they're not covering it in terms of the level of assistance. So if you are new to the outdoors, like, and you're not sure what kind of pack do I need, right? You're not going to get a lot of great help or have a ton of options at a Dick's, whereas you certainly will at an REI, and then even hopefully more so at your GOA store. So, but I think where Dick's has the advantage with these new folks is that probably most of them already shop at Dick's for
Right.
other things,
Yep.
right? And so while they may not get a lot of assistance or have all of the options that they would have at an REI, they have a familiarity there, and a comfort with going into those stores. And I think that's a key thing that specialty retail needs to really embrace. And it was, I think, something that Wes talked about on your podcast is specialty retail really has to be that place where people want to go and feel welcomed and not shamed for not knowing what a
Right.
carabiner is, right? And really feel like that they can go in and have assistance and have people that will sort of embrace them and say, yeah, hey, I'm so excited that you want to get into this activity. Let me tell you all about it and how much I love it, and here's what I would do.
So beyond the REI and Dix of it all, you also recently weighed into one other topic that we discussed here in the Rock Fight, which was about Mountain Hardware's bankruptcy purchase of Eastern Mountain Sports. Anyone listening to this who hasn't heard those episodes, EMS is looking to be acquired out of bankruptcy again buy UK's Mountain Warehouse for $5 million with only 7 of their doors remaining if that sale goes through. Go listen to Monday's episode of The Rock Fight if you want to hear more. In your post, again, on LinkedIn, you made the case for there being some upside to bringing EMS on if you're Mountain Warehouse, and I think I agree with you. And there's a lot on paper that makes sense. But like I said on our Monday show, I definitely have a tough time believing in EMS to get over the hump. I don't know if you listened to the episode, but I talked about how when I was at Polar Tech, over 10 years ago, said we always viewed EMS as your drunk uncle who you really were really rooting for. You're like, come on, we really believe it. This is the time. You're going to get it together.
You can get clean. And you can do it.
Right. And I pointed out that was 3 owners ago. So, if you had to sort of predict how this plays out, what do you think happens here with EMS and Mountain Warehouse?
Yeah, hard to say. I think the first question is why, right? So Mountain Warehouse, to those that don't know, they're pretty big over in the UK. 200 plus stores. I think over almost 400 million in over $400 million in sales. So they're a good size, but they're very much on the value end of the scale. Like their average transaction is like $35, right? Yeah.
Oh wow!
So
like the Hibbits or Big Five of European outdoor kind of.
Yeah. And mainly their own product. Like it's about 80% Mountain Warehouse stuff. So they produce a lot of product. And so I think the big, one of the things about EMS that was always a core part of theirs was that they had about 50% of their volume was their own EMS brand product.
Right.
And a lot of their, shells and pants and whatever go back for, decades in terms of the product. So I would think the first thing they're going to do is they're going to come in and say, well, cool. It's great that you have this private brand thing. We're going to go through the Mountain Hardware catalog, Mountain Warehouse catalog. I don't want to piss off my good friends over at Mountain Hardware.
And Emeryville, no one's talking about you, Hardware. Go back to sleep. It's fine.
No, Troy, don't worry about it. It's okay. But the Mountain Warehouse folks, I would think they're going to go through their catalog and they say, okay, well, this is the closest thing to this EMS style. This is the closest thing to the pants, and
logo swap it and ship it to the US, right?
Exactly, and that's gonna be the new EMS line. And then I think the bigger question though is what's the rest of the store going to look like, right?
Yeah,
because is it going to be just like basically an EMS version of Mountain Warehouse, so pretty much all their stuff, or are they going to try carry more or whatever the boots and stuff that they tried to bring in?
Yeah.
All these sort of Euro brands, or will they want to bring in outside brands? Will outside brands want to be there? Obviously brands have been a little burned over the last X number of years.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. So I think that's so step one is that, right? Come in, figure out the merchandise assortment, kind of rework things, get it out there, see how it works. And then
the opportunity is probably different for Mountain Warehouse to kind of build up your point, right? And up until now, EMS, probably some of the problems were they were probably overvalued almost every time they changed hands and a lot more problems. And like, hey, listen, $5 million, which is less than one store's worth of revenue. And we're only going to take 7 of them. And we're going to see we're going to kick the tires really hard before we figure out what we're going to do with these things. It might be the first time there's been a real opportunity to build it back up from such a low point.
Right. I think the question, so let's just say it works. Okay. Let's say it works in those 7 stores all up in the Northeast. Then what, right? Because they already have 9 stores in the US, Mountain Warehouse does. I think they're all in outlet centers. So which is interesting.
You just got Sierra's attention.
I was just going to say, we already have a low market player in the space, and it's Sierra.
Sierra just parked up. I was like, excuse me, what? Who's standing on our corner?
Value pricing? What? That's a whole other podcast. But yeah, the Sierra thing, just as an aside, I really question them adding as many stores as they are, because they're living off of an inventory bubble that is not going to continue. Right.
Well, they're just going to turn themselves into PFAS outlet. Like what are we doing here?
Well, that'll work for a year, but then what?
Right.
No. PFAS is forever. They've said so.
That's-
This will never end.
That's the marketing that PFAS
That's
needs. Just buy this one coat,
PFAS,
you'll
that's
never need
right.
another
That's
one.
right.
There you go.
No, but sorry, your
But-
point. Yeah, about Sierra.
But the thing, okay, if you go back to 2008 and 2009, in overall retail, luxury retail, it was just swimming in product. It was a disaster. And so that was when like the Gilt Group, do you remember those guys? Rue La La, those guys?
Yes.
They all came along because they were like all of these brands were falling over themselves to give them amazing deals to get through all of this inventory. Well, fast forward 5 years, the brands got their inventory house back in order. Rue La La, the Gilt Group couldn't get the stuff, and I think are they even around anymore? I don't even know, right? So I would seriously question Sierra growing as aggressively as they can, because one of two things happens: either the industry continues to overproduce and they're
Yeah.
fine, which God, I hope that isn't the case, or the industry gets its act together and then Sierra's like, oh shit, where are we going to get all this product? Right.
Well, but
Are they
we do know that they very much contract with a lot of folks to produce for them as well. So,
yes.
but you're not wrong,
Yes.
though. I mean, that will be there. It doesn't mean that they're going to produce that much more to continue to open 20 to 30 stores a year, too, right? So a balance will have to be struck at some point.
Yeah. Or I think what you'll see is a lot more non-outdoorsy brands kind of showing up in there. Like
Yeah,
you'll go
right.
in and be like, it's a Tony Hawk brand, whatever, and it's just like, oh, that's outdoorsy, sure.
Sierra picks up the phone to TJ Maxx headquarters, like, who's Marshall's got? Who they got? What they got over there? We need a few things.
Trend
But
shopping.
back to
London Fog, that would work, right? Get a London Fog jacket, we could do that.
But we started out the show when you talk about Mountain Warehouse with nine doors, and we derailed your final thought there on with EMS and Mountain Warehouse.
Yeah, so the really, I think if the EMS thing works, then the question is what's next. So you could say, well, let's take our existing 9 stores in all these outlet stores, let's flip those to EMS because people know who that is, maybe, and with EMS merch and go down that path. Then the next thing is to say, okay, wow, we're gonna go on a nationwide rollout of these EMS branded Mountain Warehouse stores. That's where I think it gets a little sticky because while EMS has absolutely got a brand and a presence in the Northeast, I don't know. You go into Chicago, go into Kansas City, go anywhere on the West Coast, people are like, EMS, never heard of it.
It's a medical device company.
There you go.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, they tried before. I mean, it's been a while since they tried to go that far outside the region, but they never tried again, no matter who the owner was. I think you're right about that. I think the assortment question you bring up is interesting, given what you know about what you've just described about Mountain Warehouse. That being said, these are in all the towns. The point I was making about in the Northeast, they're the specialty retailers in a lot of these towns. So I mean, they really have maintained that authenticity as an outdoor store more so than an REI. And if they just now become a little bit more of an a discount outdoor apparel adjacent sort of store, New Englanders don't keep their mouth shut. I think they're going to hear about it. I think so. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, how they sort of develop the brand and what they stock. It is, it probably is a worthy risk, but you're right. I mean, where does it all play out? I mean, I guess it's still kind of like begs the question. I guess the last thing to really talk about is sort of like we've gone all the way from Dixon REI to kind of now if you focus on either small chain outdoor specialty, like we've talked a bunch about Gearhead Outfitters on this pod. You look at the state of sort of independent outdoor specialty. The thing that gives me concern there, beyond even if the participation report isn't adversely affecting them, doesn't seem like there's a lot of young owners entering the specialty space, right? I think that's something I'm sure the GOA is keeping an eye on. Of once all these folks are done, are they selling their stores? Are new people coming up behind them, or are we looking at the death of specialty retail in the next 20 to 30 years? So are you optimistic about the future of kind of small independent outdoor retail?
I am. Well, what I would say is I think it's critical that we do support and keep outdoor specialty retail because they are the entree to that jumping off between somebody who's just into the outdoors versus who becomes an enthusiast.
Right.
I think that generally happens at an independent specialty retail store, not at an REI or a Dick's. Right. So I think they're absolutely critical. But yeah, there are challenges. My hope is that brands will get the message and start to really support independent specialty retail. And I think that's starting. Like at GOA this year, there were a lot of senior level executives from these brands, not just like the national sales person,
Yeah.
but like there was presidents of brands at this thing. So I think the brands are starting to get that message. That wasn't the case, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm.
But I think it needs to go further. One of the things that I'm pushing that I think needs to happen is brands need to come together between their D2C and their wholesale and really think big picture about the brand and do things like, really, if you're on a PDP of a brand website, you should be able to buy it on that site, but just as easily buy it in the local special retailer, and they should be pushing it on that site, pushing it for sustainability, pushing it for the overall good of the good of the industry. But by the way, take a commission, right? I mean, let's actually make it so that all of these incentives are aligned, and make it more of a marketplace to where, hey, you want to buy this jacket, you can get it at Joe's outdoor store down the street, and if they we'll do the whole transaction here on xyz.com, go into Joe's, pick it up, the whole transaction is done, we take our commission, they get the sale, everybody is happy, right? But too much today, what happens is you've got the D2C folks that are in a totally separate silo than the wholesale folks. I mean, they barely talk to each other, right, in most of these brands. And so the last thing the D2C folks want to do is to divert that sale or that person that they get onto their website to a local person, because then they lose the sale. And that's totally the wrong way to think, but that's the way the incentive structures are built today.
This is a great point. Also, too, as you're just saying that, the new renewed focus on these brands looking at their wholesale channel, it feels to me it's less visionary connecting of the dots for the health of the industry, and more because they so totally overplayed the D2C hand, and it's coming back to bite them.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, so many of these brands, they looked at Nike as like this shining star of whatever Nike can do no wrong, whatever they do, we've got to do it, right? And they didn't think, well, okay, maybe Nike's great because of the product and because of their retailers, and just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's right. But it was totally the move to D2C was totally internally focused, right? Like, did the consumer say, hey, you know what? I would love brand X. I would love to not be able to find your product in a local store and touch it and try it on. I'd much rather have to go on to the internet, get it home, then figure out it was wrong, send it back to you, and then have you send me another one. That's much better. I would prefer that.
Let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Eoin, for coming on. I almost called you Ian.
It's the fellowship.
Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, the fellowship is back. Really appreciate the insight. Would love to have you on again in the future. And in the meantime, what's going on? I know you're working with a few brands. You want to shout them out real quick? Who you got in the pipeline that you're working with right now?
So a few different folks. I work with Lives In, which is an amazing, originally pants brand, but now adding to the line, and we've overalls now, and we've got tops coming this fall. So very exciting stuff there. I work with REI, which is a great women's brand in the mountain biking and ski area. I work with a couple of startups in electrification, an electric wagon, a bunch of folks.
And Nara.
And
Let's not forget about Nara.
Oh, let's not forget about Nara. Yeah, Nara is one of my faves, and did a collab with Lives In, which was great. Yeah, and the list goes on and on. I probably work with about 10 or 12 different brands, all kind of in that early-ish stage. But it's a hoot. I'm having a great time.
Well, let's get some of those brands and founders focused over on featured over on Gear and Beer. We'll get some of that lined up for the future.
Absolutely, it sounds great.
All right, thanks for coming on, Eoin. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's the show for today. Be sure to head over to the Gear and Beer podcast feed, because tomorrow a new episode drops that features Chris Hampton, and we talk about climbing strengthening tools. And of course, follow us here on The Rock Fight so you don't miss an episode. The Rock Fight is a production of Rock Fight LLC. Our producer today was David Karstad. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. And here to take us out, it's Krista Makes to sing the Rock Fight song. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.
Rock fight.